The Golden State Warriors are playing the Detroit Pistons tonight to continue an 8-game homestand that so far has been absolutely spectacular. Game 6 is tonight. Carl Foster, a brilliant basketball mind. He's a former head coach of the Oakland Soldiers AAU program, the principal of the Foster School of Basketball. He's going to join me next. We're going to talk about those two-way players, Ty Jerome and Anthony Lamb, and what he thinks the Warriors are going to do with him and them, when the 50-game marks come up, because that's all they can play. Big decisions coming for the Warriors. Plus, are things really back on track? Are there still issues at play? We're going to break it all down next. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Carl Foster joins me. Carl, promote away. Twitter accounts, Instagram. Before we get started, where can everyone follow you at?
On Instagram, I'm the real Carl Foster. And my Twitter account is the one that you always see that has the magical numbers with my birth date, 1961, on it right after. So anybody want to hit me up? I had a few people hit me up the last time. In fact, let me grab something really quick, Cyrus, and let me pull it up for me.
You're great. What are you doing? All right. So while Carl goes grab something, what are you doing? What's going on here? What's going on, Carl? What are you doing?
There we go.
All right. Carl, you are a basketball savant, sir. The Warriors are they play tonight at home again, trying to extend the winning streak to 6 games and continue a perfect homestand. But the homestand's going to end soon. And this is a weird team this year where every time they come home, everyone forgets about all the problems because, again, they have the best home record in the NBA. It's not even close. But then the moment they go back on the road, then all the problems that have been plaguing this team most of the year, the problems that are keeping this Warriors team from basically just running away in the standings, come back. And I guess my first question to you, Carl, is why do you think the Warriors are so damn good at home, yet the complete opposite on the road?
I think you really have to go to the biggest thing that when you think of leadership and you listen to the Warriors leadership, the Warriors' greatest strength is continuity and chemistry. And because they're integrating new players, putting yourself in a different environment, being on the road, it's always a different experience. And it takes a little bit of time, even for the professionals, to really get comfortable when they're traveling, finding their routines, finding out, how guys are going to respond in the adverse environments, how we're going to execute in the clutch. And if we look at it, 4 of their biggest losses, teams that we clearly thought they were going to go ahead and win those games, happened on the road, where they just had, a failure to launch at the end of games. And when you have fourth quarter breakdowns, it's needless to say a lot harder than a first quarter breakdown. And I think now they've had a chance for some of their continuity pieces, the guys that are in that second unit, guys that had to learn how to take on new roles, maybe in a new environment, like with Anthony Lamb and with Ty Jerome, or even some of the younger players like Jonathan Kuminga, even to a lesser degree, even Jordan Poole being asked to carry a much bigger load, kind of needing to do more playmaking in addition to scoring. All those guys found that, the NBA is not easy. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's kind of interesting, and we talked about this in the early season when we were on with Larry Krueger doing some different things. You've got some guys that are learning that this young talent base in the NBA is getting better and better.
Yeah.
And these teams that have kind of not been doormats, but they've kind of been kind of a step away from being legitimate threats in the Western Conference, those teams are now growing up.
Yeah.
Teams like New Orleans, even Portland, Portland picking up Jeremy was just such a huge pickup for them because it gave them another guy who could score, a guy who could play in the front court, who could do some damage that another team, has to be aware of. And hey, let's be honest, he's a Grant kid, so he knows how to play, he knows how to win. He comes from a family of NBA, both an NBA dad and an NBA uncle. So he's brought a lot to Portland. And I've been really surprised at watching how Dallas has found a rhythm after losing Brunson. They've won 6 in a row, 6 or 7 in a row. I mean, they're on a big push. So it's going to be an amazing year in the NBA this year, man.
Yeah, they've won 7 in a row. And but yet, the Mavericks are pushing. They're 4th in the standings. Then the Warriors, even though they're 9th in the standings, they're technically tied for 7th with Portland, with Phoenix, incredibly, who's plummeting. And they don't have a Derek Booker right now. Did I say that right? Is that his name? No, It's not Derek. Devin Booker, thank you. Brain fart big time there. Ty Jerome and Anthony Lamb. You've had some. I love your opinions on them, and you and I have had some discussions about this. And a huge reason I brought you on today is because one of the huge questions the Warriors are going to face, not right at the 50-game mark, because Ty and Anthony have not exactly played the same amount of games, but just to remind people the way the two-way contracts work in the NBA, you're only eligible to play 50 regular season games. You're not eligible to play in the postseason. That's why we did not see Chris Chiozza last year, among many reasons. That might not be the only reason. But nonetheless, look, Kerr loves these two. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He's routinely giving them more minutes than the lottery picks, who I also want to talk to you about in a little bit. But in your opinion, what's going to happen at around the 55-game mark of the regular season when the Warriors are going to have a huge decision to make? You only have one open roster spot right now. What do you think is going to happen? And what would you like to happen?
And those are two different questions. And one of the fun things is having a group of friends who are basketball heads. I mean, the one thing that's helped me over time is, I just have such a large community of people that love the sport, played the sport. Some of them know it really in depth, and some of them are more like fans where even though they might have played, they don't dig very deeply. So, their emotions tend to be on their sleeves. So I've asked a few of them the Ty, Jerome, Anthony Lamb question. And kind of the consensus is people have slowly fallen in love with what we saw. I know there were even some people who been around the Warriors, been fans of the Warriors that are on the media side that took them a little while to kind of find out, hey, are these guys really valuable? Or are they just filling in and Steve Kerr is just comfortable with them? Needless to say, they are warm blankets for Steve. And a lot of that has to do with what Steve has always done with his reserve unit, which is he looks at them like he looked at the reserve teams that he played on, where coaches like Phil Jackson and Greg Popovich found a way to make every guy feel valuable. And over time, Steve has done that as well. And I think the standard that he's held for the young guys has been really, really advantageous because he's held them accountable instead of giving them something. Mm-hmm. So when I think about Ty Jerome, I look at Ty Jerome and I know the player he says he looks up to the most is Steve Nash. But when I think about him as a player, I think of somebody like Jeff Hornacek, a guy who's the average person who's a fan really wouldn't have valued. They'd kind of looked at him as, hey, he doesn't look that quick. He doesn't look that athletic. Yeah, he can shoot the ball a little bit, but hey, it looks like they could take it from him. But at the end of the day, when you understand technical basketball, you understand strategic basketball, and you really recognize where to be, when to make a move, when not to, when a defender is at their weakest point, when you can attack them, you can be a productive player, which Ty has become. Of the two, I think Anthony Lamb has the better chance of being the guy that sticks. And the reason for that, if you could only take one, and right now there'd only be one potential contract, and maybe there's no contract, because let's be honest, Joe Lacob is not committed yet to pay a 15th roster spot.
Great point.
But in the event he does,
yes.
The reason I would say that I think that Anthony Lamb is the better choice and the probable choice is because if you just look at the lineup, there are 4 guards in front of Ty Jerome if everyone's healthy. Steph, Clay, Jordan Poole, and Dante DiVincenzo, who is clearly, the other thing I put out there for a number of people, even put it out on social media, was we all love Gary Payton II. He was an amazing puzzle piece and nobody wanted to see him leave. He bled Oakland, he bled Warriors, and he bled hard work and grit. But if you look at this Warrior team, in terms of the composition of the roster, Dante DiVincenzo might be a little bit of a better fit with this grouping of players that they'd have to play with than maybe even Gary, who'd be amazing if he was still on the team. Because Dante brings some very unique attributes to a team that has a lot of younger reserves who needed an additional playmaker.
Right.
Having said that, that's not a decision that needs to be made. I'm so thankful and so excited that Gary has gotten healthy enough to where he's able to get back on the floor and perform. And I think he's going to have a great impact on Portland. I think their team really can use what he brings, and we are still going to miss it. But there's all of these little pieces. When I look at Anthony Lamb can play wing and forward and a little bit of undersized post. The player that he reminds me of is a guy that I've seen a lot of fans say they wish the Warriors would make a trade to get, which is Jay Crowder. Basically, Anthony Lamb is Jay Crowder, a guy who can space the forward about 6'6",
yeah,
who was a college wing forward, who can play 2 or 3 positions defensively, who clearly understands the system and doesn't mind being a secondary puzzle piece, a guy who can take a charge or maybe get a deflection or be the guy that makes the proper rotation so that the other defenders like Looney and Draymond feel really confident when he's on the floor. Those are things that he brings, and the Warriors don't have a glut of guys in the front court, but they have a tremendous backcourt. And so from a versatility standpoint, I actually think Anthony might be the better long-term answer. But hey, I wouldn't be uncomfortable if they had Ty Jerome. Be honest, I wouldn't be uncomfortable if over time they found a magical way to have both of them. But we know that there's only so many spots that are going to be available.
Yeah, and I said they're actually almost the same height. I thought Crowder was like 6'8", 6'9". He's listed as 6'6".
Yeah, he's only 6'6".
That's a great call. And I'm gonna when we come back, I'm gonna ask you what you think the Warriors are gonna actually do, because that's the question. Because you brought up Lacob in the pocketbook, which I brought up as well, that no one seems to be mentioning. There's the fact that you're right. We'll delve into this a lot more, because first I got to give some love to BetOnline, and more specifically BetOnline.net.
Oh, yes.
What's up?
I said, oh, yes.
Well, and BetOnline proposed something interesting. Kylan Mills and I talked about this yesterday. And while we're mentioning BetOnline.net, your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis, they list, it's really bizarre. And Carl, you know as well as I do that the odds makers don't set these lines based on their personal feelings, but rather what they think the public in general feels, so they can get the even money between the two sides. But right now, they're giving better odds to the Clippers winning the Western Conference than the Golden State Warriors. They're giving the Phoenix Suns better odds than the Golden State Warriors to win the Pacific Division, even though they both have the same record right now. What are your thoughts on the odds makers putting both those teams ahead of the Warriors in those respective categories?
Well, I think when I looked at the season up front, there was really only one team in the Western Conference when I really sat down. If the Warriors were healthy and all the chips developed the way we thought they would, we know some of that's taken a little bit more time in terms of JW and also JK and even Moody to a lesser degree. As those guys kind of fill in their roles, we felt that this Warrior team would really have one true competitor, and that would be the Clippers, because of their depth, because of their star power and Kawhi and Paul George. If they were both healthy, we also know that they're pretty stacked in the backcourt in terms of a lot of veteran savvy. I wasn't as afraid of Phoenix, although I did think Phoenix would do really well in the regular season. I still think they have a bugaboo in the postseason, and I still believe they're a little small. I don't have a problem with Phoenix being considered to be the leader at this point of being the Pacific Division winner. We know that doesn't carry any awards anymore, because now it's all based on slotting or seeding. Relative to the Western Conference, I still have no problem with people seeing the Clippers as being the biggest threat. But at the end of the day, the Clippers don't know that they can beat the Warriors in a 7-game series, but the Warriors know they can beat the Clippers in a 7-game series.
Damn right.
That mental advantage is huge.
Agreed.
Dallas feels the same way.
Yep.
And nobody will say it, but the Pelicans, the Blazers, even the Nuggets don't feel confident that they can beat the Warriors. They know it's possible that they can.
Yep.
Where the Warriors carry the sword right now. They're the king of the North. They're the ones that know at the end of the day, you got to show up in Winterfell and you got to be ready to be at war with us. And they're Jon Snow.
Did you just watch Game of Thrones? Is that why you're throwing this?
I've watched Game of Thrones for 5. I've watched all 8 seasons 5 different times. I love it. It's the best written show I've ever seen.
The dragon thing is amazing as well. I can't wait for season 2 of that. But regardless, great call on that. I totally agree with you. You can get all the latest odds and trends just by going to betonline.net. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. So, Carl Foster, the Warriors, right now, or not right now, but very soon, they're going to have a big decision to make. You express what you think the Warriors should do, and you've expressed your opinions on Lamb. I like that comparison a lot, given how surprisingly adept of a three-point shooter Anthony Lamb is. I also wholeheartedly agree with you that we're seeing a lot of Ty Jerome right now simply because Steph is injured. And when Steph comes back, he's going to fall behind DiVincenzo in the pecking order. So we're probably not going to see him that much. But again, at the 50-something game mark, the Warriors will have a very interesting decision to make. They only have one roster spot open. Jermichael Green seems to be the odd man out if the Warriors do decide to keep both of them. In your opinion, what do you think will happen with the two-way players?
Well, it really comes down to one question. Andre Iguodala. If Andre Iguodala, who looks very healthy when he's on the bench, now there's a difference between life healthy and basketball healthy. So when he becomes basketball healthy and he's ready to be on the floor, Andre Iguodala brings an intellect and we know a savvy and an understanding of the Warriors system and the NBA and how other teams will play come playoff time better than any other player that is out there that would be available for the Warriors to even take a look at picking up. So almost picking up Andre Iguodala as a mid-season pickup, because he hasn't played in a game yet, we know
right.
That really moves somebody like Anthony Lamb down the pecking order. It moves the desire to have a 15th roster player. It kind of makes it a moot point because you don't need it. If you've got a second big in James Wiseman, who you could feel confident in a playoff series that you could give quality minutes to, and I think he has begun to show that movement in that direction. I hated that he got hurt the other night, prior to the game where he got injured in a little warm-up exercise. So I think it was some 3-on-3. But he had begun to show that he had adopted that mentality they wanted him to have and that he wanted to fulfill that role. I think he called himself prior to the season, he wanted to be Kevon Looney 2.0. If he takes on that role, you can match up against the Robert Williams in a playoff series. You can match up against the Zubats in a playoff series. You can throw another body at Jokic, which is really what you're talking about.
Yep.
So...
And that just to add to that I felt like the Christmas Day game against the Grizzlies was a massive test for Wiseman. And I thought he passed because he was out there battling with Adams, Jaren Jackson. I mean, and that was just a huge game, a statement game. I call it that because the Grizzlies wanted that desperately. Yes. And the Warriors still fought them off. I don't know if you agree with that notion or not, but I thought after that game, Wiseman's earned his place. I don't know if you agree.
I think there were two things that happened. For the average basketball fan, they saw him against the Brooklyn Nets and saw him go off for 30 and they got excited. Well, James got excited by that because we're talking about still a young man.
Yep.
Young man. He has less than 100 games of basketball experience after high school. But I think that was to get his personal confidence level high. Mm-hmm. But to get his team confidence level high, it was done on Christmas. Yeah. And he definitely opened up the present and he showed that he was well deserving of every minute he's got after that. And I think even the role that they see him playing from here on, because they need him at his best, rebounding, setting screens, patrolling the paint, and then being able to track the basketball when guys are attacking the rim so that he can stay away from trouble, block the shots he can get to, and really just contest the other ones. And I thought he did that incredibly well against Memphis. And you're right, Steven Adams is another guy he's going to have to go up against. Let's be honest, Valanciunas is a guy he might have to see in a playoff series. So they know they need that puzzle piece. And we know Kevon Looney is playing as well as he's ever played in his career. So if you've got those two guys at center, You've got Draymond and JK doing what they do with all their versatility at the forward spot. You've got the ability to use an Anthony Lamb as kind of a Jay Crowder type puzzle piece in a particular series, because you would need him against a team like Dallas. Dallas is a team you're going to have to match up with their perimeter wings that can shoot the ball, but yet still be able to space the floor enough so that they're not putting so much focus on stopping Steph. Because when it comes playoff time, or as Draymond Green calls it, the 16-game season versus the 82-game season, it's all about matchups. It's all about, hey, how are we going to dissect playing against this team versus another? I mean, you remember in 2018 when the Houston Rockets were loaded?
Yes.
They won the conference. They were the number 1 seed. They had home court advantage against the Warriors. In that series, you did not see JaVale McGee play.
Which drove me crazy, by the way. But yeah, go on. Sorry.
Many fans didn't like it because they loved JaVale and
yeah.
they loved what he brought with the vertical spacing. However, they knew the ability to switch defensively was so huge with guys like Eric Gordon and with Trevor Ariza. You know, those guys could all step out and shoot the basketball. You couldn't have another aircraft carrier on the floor defensively who could be taken advantage of, and James Harden could get him in a one-on-one situation off a screen and roll. I think you're going to see the same thing this year in the playoffs, and the Warriors are building towards the 16 game. I do believe they are fighting to get in that top 4. And if we look at it right now, what are they, 2.5 games out of the top 4?
I think 1.5. I have this. They're very close. I have the standings right here. The Warriors currently right now for the 4th seed are two back, and for the 5th seed only a game back. That's where they stand. I think even the 3rd seed is attainable. But
let's be honest, the Pelicans are going to spend 3 weeks without Zion. That's going to be tough for them to maintain.
Yep.
Portland are going to get a boost with Gary Payton II getting in the lineup, but they're going to have to find the continuity of how to mix in a new piece and make that balance out with their other pieces. So everybody's going to have some highs and lows for these next games that are going to come up, this next segment. Remember what I said, you break an NBA season down in 4 segments. The first segment, the Warriors struggle. The second segment, they found their sea legs. The third segment, they want to make a push. And then the 4th segment, you want to fight off the pretenders so that you can really get yourself in that position in that top 5. You definitely would like to be top 4 because you want home court advantage in round 1. They know they can win round 2 if they're at home or on the road. They're not concerned about that in the 16-game season, but they have to show the consistency during the regular season so that the fear of God shows up on some of these other franchises, because they're kind of laughing. The Warriors aren't any good on the road. Well, They know what the Warriors do when it comes to playoff time.
You know, we're joined by Carl Foster here, former head coach of the Oakland Soldiers AAU program, principal of the Foster School of Basketball. You can follow him on Twitter at Carl Foster 1961. The Warriors right now, when you look at the stats, for example, their defense, I believe in terms of points per game given up, they're 26th out of 30 teams. In terms of point differential, a stat which they normally dominate, they're 18th right now in the NBA at minus 0.3. Their offense is fine. It's always been the defense. And the margin of victories have been difficult because of that. My personal theory is the team is it's a combination of things, right? Obviously they have a new bench, but also when you look at the stars and the veterans and what they've been through, it's just, you have a malaise, you have boredom. I guess my question to you, Carl, is, do you think Steve Kerr and Bob Myers have lost any sleep this season?
No, I think for Steve and his staff, and let's just stop for a second and really commend the new coaches who've taken on new roles, the guys that moved up, went from behind the bench to on the bench. Needless to say, we know how important Kenny Atkinson was to be able to stay. I mean, that was huge because every coach wants to have that guy that they can turn to, or I'll do it this way since you're to my right. Yep. They want that guy that they can turn to and they feel confident. And if you notice, you see Kenny get up. Kenny gets up and he's actually communicating. That means that's that trust factor that a head coach feels, that I can give certain responsibilities to that coach and he can not only carry them out, but my players are going to immediately carry them out. They've done a great job in skill development. There's still a lot of the systemic stuff that players have to learn and get comfortable with in the Warrior system, because it's a system of IQ. It's a system that's very different than any other basketball team on the planet. playing at the pro level. So it really does take time for guys to kind of dig in. It's like getting a master's degree instead of getting your associate degree at a junior college for some teams. Hey, we play pick and roll and our best player gets isolation and they go to work. The Warriors don't do that. The Warriors are getting a master's degree. And for guys like Steph and Draymond, they have their PhD.
Absolutely right. Carl, anything you'd like to promote before we go? The Warriors, we're recording this on Wednesday. It's 1 p.m. right now. They play the Pistons tonight in game 6 of the homestand. I'm obviously going to bring you back on again soon. Love your insights. Anything you'd like to promote personally? You can follow.
The only thing I want to promote right now is prayer for the young man, Mr. Hamlin. I mean, what we saw that night, if you're a football fan, and I was watching the game with my wife, is something I'd never seen either. I've seen many players carted off. I've seen many players have injuries that they sustained that took them out for a while. But I've actually been in a basketball gym where one of my friends was coaching a young man who played in our AAU program, and he fell out during a game at El Cerrito High School. And they had to do CPR on him. Fortunately, his coach, Michael Booker, who's a police officer in the city of Richmond, an amazing man, was able to do the CPR, and he did it for a long period of time. His assistant coach, Daryl Jackson, who I went to middle school with, who's also a police officer, they were right there. And because they were there, it was amazing. And I sat by the dad, Larry Gerganius, and his mother, who was the young man's aunt. The young man's name is David Gerganius. And they went through the same trauma that the Hamlin family is going through. I got a chance to visit the hospital with the family and just see just how tough it is to go through everything they went through. Fortunately, David not only came out and was healed, God bless the situation. He's gone on to become a father, an amazing young man, and a tremendous character of somebody who is a great citizen in our community. So I reached out to Larry when I saw what happened to the young man, Mr. Hamlin, and just thanked him for being such an example. And I hope people just continue to support the cause. They can go online and see that young man's charity where he gets the toys for tots in the community he grew up in Pittsburgh. And I hope people will donate. I think the last time I saw it, he was looking for 2,500. He's now over 5 million.
6 now. I literally just looked it up. It's now over 6 million. And it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. So
that's the only thing I can promote, that God's will be done in that man's life, and that he will get a chance to live his life and have an impact on millions and millions of people, even if he never plays a football game ever again. So, sports become very small when the human dynamic kicks in. And so for me, that's the most important thing that I would ask for support.
There you go. That's very well said. And that was an incredibly sobering moment I've never seen that either, Carl, I mean, the CPR is when I feel like, what got real. I'm glad that we're seeing progress with Demar Hamlin. And thanks for bringing that up. That was.
I work in the medical field every day. I'm not a clinician. I work with clinicians all the time in the role that I play for the company I work for. And the one thing I can tell you, you could feel the urgency when you saw the medical staff scurrying. And that's when I knew something's different, because at first it looked like maybe he had gotten knocked out by the helmet in the chin. And then he stood up, and then all of a sudden, like the old boxer John Tate, he just fell down. I'm thinking, well, maybe it's a delayed knockout from a concussion, but it was clearly much greater than that. And, we're all excited when we hear even the smallest bit of news that things are moving in a positive direction. And so I'm looking forward to him getting a chance to get up and tell his story and tell the testimony of how he ended up healed, and he's able to move on with his life and do other great things.
Beautiful. Very well said. And you can follow Carl Foster again on Twitter at Carl Foster 1961. Kevin Dana, who normally joins me on Wednesdays, will join me tomorrow. And otherwise, Carl, man, thanks as always. It's always a pleasure, sir. I don't know. Hopefully I'll see you again on Kruger's program soon. I haven't been on there lately just because my life is pure chaos right now. I'm trying to find a place to live is insane. That's all. I'll leave it at that.
Especially on that side of the water, baby.
It's not fun.
Come to the dark side. Come to the East Bay.
Sounds good. Carl, thank you so much, man. And thank you, everyone. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Take care.